What is going on, everyone? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and I was a little hesitant to make a video on this one because I know this can be a very touchy subject, and I don't really feel like being yelled at in the comments on this, but hey, I think it's an important topic to go over and thought it would be, interesting to talk about. And hey, let me know in the comment section what your feelings are on all of this. So this is a post that I saw in one of the Facebook groups that I'm in. And basically it's about a comic that this person was interested in. They made an offer. They felt like the original list price was high. So they made an offer and then the person blocked them. And they are upset that they got blocked. So as someone who also sells a fair amount, I'll say, you do generally have to have a pretty thick skin as a seller, with all the different types of offers you get and everything. But I'll say if I do get an absurdly low offer on something, I will often add that person to my eBay block list just because I'm just like, this isn't worth it. I don't want to deal with this person in the future. It's just, to me, it's a sign of a potential problem. Now, if the offer is fair, all that, like, I don't care. I don't mind offers. I have offers turned on. But like the really low ball offers, like if you have like a $500 book and they're like, here's $50 or $100, I'm just like, I'm not dealing with this. But let me know in the comments, how do you deal with those? I think it's easier. It's one of the pieces of advice that I got early on when I started selling, is from my brother. And he was just like, there's plenty of buyers out there. You don't have to deal with like the really difficult people. It's just not worth the hassle. And on eBay with negative feedback and all of that, like that just is a sign of something that may be trouble in the future. But let's get into this one. So it goes, I've never understood how sellers pretty much ignore past sold listings of the same book, same grade, and make the buyer seem like they don't know what they're talking about or think you're just shooting a lowball offer. It's common knowledge that if you put a lot of money into a book, like having it graded or signed, maybe with a cool label, you'll never get your money back on it. Now I'm going to stop right there. And actually, I was surprised in the comment section. Usually when I would see a post like this where somebody's complaining about a seller that they feel like the price is high, a lot of times the comment sections will be really like be on the poster's side. They're like, oh yeah, sellers are terrible. They're always asking too much. That was not the case here. The comment section was very much on the side of the seller and thought that this was kind of a bad take from this buyer. And I'll start with this part right here. It is absolutely not common knowledge that if you get a book graded, signed, in a custom label, that you'll never get your money back on it. This is one of the big reasons grading exists. People get books graded to get additional value out of the book. There are certain signatures that add significant value to a book. And the people that maybe want that on the secondary market just don't want to deal with going through the signing process, the risk of not getting a 9.8 or whatever grade they might want, that kind of thing. So I'll say, like, that first little statement right there, absolutely not accurate. So I'll go with that. And there were multiple people in the comments that said the same thing. So, but here's a small example of this. This seller on Mercari had an Avengers 196 first appearance of Taskmaster and a CGC 2.5 Mark Jeweler signed by George Perez, listed for $300. Then lowered to $275. First off, this book is a 2.5 is worth around $30, maybe 20 by itself, and it's a low grade Mark Jeweler. I could buy a low grade Mark Jeweler on eBay for 50, maybe less. Finally, the George Perez signature. The last sold listing on eBay was a copy of Avengers 196 and a 7.5 signed by George Perez, and Joe Rubenstein sold for 105, probably less than that. So I offered 150. Could have gone to 180 because I just wanted this cool book as a display piece, not an investment. Then I got a text on Mercari from him saying no. When I tried to reply, he fully blocked me. Like, okay, this is a sign of a seller who believes every offer is dumb, but his is right on the money. Okay, but a sign that a seller thinks every offer is dumb, but their price is right on the money. So there's a few things here. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to jump over to GPA because there's a little bit here that's tricky with this book. So GPA is one of the tools that I use for pricing comics. It's Avengers 196, and I've got it set for signed books and universal books. And so you can see this book sells all the time. It's obviously a very popular book, so there's lots of comparables. However, where it gets tricky is that there are not necessarily a ton of comparables for a Mark Jewelers. So if we go down to the bottom, we look for like the lowest Mark Jewelers that sold, lowest grade. Obviously, there's no 2.5s. I mean, you can see like a 2.5 is not a valuable graded book on its own. Like a 4.5 here for $53, a 5.0 newsstand for $50. We had a 5.5 signed by George Perez for $95 last year, or like a year and a half ago. But yeah, I mean, 5.5 here graded 25, like that's like grading costs. And so, but we keep going up. And here's the first Mark Jewelers, a 6.5, sold for just $45 in July of last year. So, yep. Yeah. I mean, he's on the money there that this 2.5 Mark Jewelers, if you just looked at it like this, it's a $20 to $30 book. And to be fair, graded, all that, like there's a lower limit on a book like this. It's probably $50. The tricky thing is that there is zero history. If you go through every single sale for this book that is recorded in GPA, which obviously isn't everything, but it's a lot of them, and it's a good representative set, there are zero Mark Jewelers copies that have been signed by George Perez. And George Perez has passed away. So there may be, this could be the only one. I don't know. Maybe it's not, maybe it is. But there aren't going to be any new ones. And so it could be a one-of-one type book. And so like you can see here, newsstand signed by George Perez, $188 for 9.0. And so that's where it can get very tricky with a book like this, that there really aren't comparables. There are comparables for George Perez signatures. There are comparables for Mark Jewelers, but there are not comparables with the two of them together. Now, to be fair, I think that this poster's offer of 150 could have gone to 180 is completely reasonable. I think that's a completely reasonable offer. But, and I probably wouldn't have blocked the person at all because of that. Like I absolutely would not have blocked the person because of that. However, if I'm that seller, it might not be what I'm willing to accept for it. That's the whole thing when it comes to collectibles, especially more rare items. And in this case, rare meaning like, yeah, obviously this book in itself is not rare, but this combination of things is potentially pretty rare. And so that person might just go, I'm willing to wait for that big Mark Jewelers fan, that big George Perez fan that's willing to pay the price that I want for it. I don't need to sell right away. I'm not in a rush to sell. And when we go into the comment section, you see this stated a few different times from the commenters. So the first one right here just says, maybe the seller blocked you because of posts like this. You're making a lot of assumptions. The seller said, no, probably blocked you to not waste the time with back and forth. And that's what I said early on with eBay. Like if I get like a really low offer, I don't want to deal with that person. But this person says, if I own a book and someone doesn't like the price, make an offer. If it's good, I'll sell. If it's not, I won't. I'm not sure why this is such a hard concept for anyone. No one is obligated to sell anything for less than they are willing to. And I'll say, like, this has been one of the really interesting things I've seen with this post and this goes along with what I'm kind of seeing in prices in the comic market right now. We do still see that things are still kind of trending down, especially for silver, bronze, modern. But the mood does appear to be changing. And that's what I was saying earlier, where normally if I saw a post like this, the comment section would just be railing on the seller and completely backing up the buyer and saying like, oh, everybody's always overcharging, all this kind of stuff. But that was not the case here. And I think that is really interesting to see, is that people are, it feels like they're changing the mood on the idea of the prices for comics and what sellers, quote, can do. And that's been my take generally for selling comics, is that when I'm selling comics, I don't really need to sell anything. Like, yeah, I buy and sell comics. It's a side business for me, but I don't need to sell anything. If I want to sell it, I'll sell it. If I don't, I don't. If it's the price I want to sell it at, I'll let it go. And I don't need to argue with anyone about it. Like, if you don't like a price, just move on. That's the advice I generally give to people when they're out there and they're looking for something and they're upset that the list prices are high. It's like, well, that's not the book for you. Wait for an auction or whatever. Sometimes there's a premium that goes with being able to buy a book now versus waiting for an auction to come up. And like we see with this one, this means this book has never sold. on Heritage, never sold on Comic Connect, never sold on My Comic Shop, never sold on Hakes. Like all these big auction houses that get pulled into GPA, those have never sold. This book, this combination of a Mark Jewelers and George Perez has never sold before. And so they're willing to wait. And so we'll just continue on here. Never understand why buyers don't understand that maybe I don't need to sell the book, and so I don't want to take a loss, especially for a signed book that has no or few direct comps. The correct price is speculative. Now, there isn't everybody that agrees with this. You can see the next one here. What's worse is on eBay when they have a book with a or best offer on a say $300 book worth $250, make $275 because you really want the book, and they decline with a counter offer. It's like, yeah, that's kind of stuff. Like sometimes you just got to accept the offer, right? Like if you got offers turned on, you get a reasonable offer, you accept it. But like I said, I feel like this was a very interesting post because of the comments. That's what really got me interested. Here in collectibles, a seller can post an item for whatever they like. Likewise, as a buyer, I can make an offer for whatever amount I choose, period. The end. The rest is just unnecessary drama. I like this. I like that, and yeah, it's from a seller's perspective. I like seeing this, that maybe people aren't going to be just fighting constantly about pricing, because that's something that I've noticed has been a big difference in pricing in the comics collectibles world versus something like cards. I've noticed cards, because I watch a lot of TCG type content and that kind of thing on YouTube. Cards, it seems like people are a lot more open, to discussion about pricing and everything. Comics, it can be a really touchy subject. And people can get really upset about it, really worked up about it, but people are a lot more open about it on cards. And maybe this is a sign of things changing a little bit, being a little more comfortable talking about pricing and not necessarily saying that everything, has to be listed at the exact last sold price. Because that's always one of those big sticking points that you get, is that last sold doesn't necessarily mean that's what the future sale is going to be. I mean, as someone who, if you watch my videos, I price out all kinds of stuff. I price comics all the time. And generally, the last sold or a history of sales can tell you approximately what a book is going to sell for. But there are always surprises. And if everything sold for the last sold price, prices would never change. And so sometimes books are going to sell for more. Sometimes they're going to sell for less. And one I'll give an example of, I talked about in my the Heritage auction video that I just did. We'll jump over to this because I know which book it was. So this was Green Lantern number 59. So this is the first appearance of Guy Gardner. And there was a 9.8 that sold on Heritage. Here it is. The 9.8 that sold on Heritage in their signature auction or platinum auction this week. See, it sold for $30,000. Look at the Pacific Coast pedigree copy. It sold in 2023, $9,000. Twin Cities sold in 2021. Peak Comic Boom, $10,200. 9.8, 2018 sold for $8,200. 2014, $5,000. This one, $30,000. You think if this book was listed fixed price on eBay or wherever else, like one of the auction houses fixed price sales platforms, for 30 grand that it would have sold? I don't at all. This sold for 30 grand because there were a couple bidders that got worked up and really wanted this book, and it drove up to a brand new record price. Now, that might not be a repeatable sale, but this is how this kind of stuff can happen. And that last sale, the most recent sale was 9 grand. And here it went for 30. And so we had Guy Gardner appear in that Superman trailer being played by Nathan Fillion, so like, I'm sure that type of thing played a role here. But that's the type of sale where you can see that it's like last sale does not guarantee anything. This was it was probably the biggest surprise sale that I saw in that auction in terms of the upside. And similarly, it can happen on the downside with auctions, but those last sales don't necessarily mean that's the future price. Like I think if a 9.8 came up again 2 months, probably sells for like 12 to 15, but this one sold for 30. And so that's what I'm getting at here, is that no one is required to give anyone any specific price. And if it doesn't work out for you, just move along to the next book. And especially with this one, though, this, this Avengers 194, there can also be instances where things are really unique. It's where 1 + 1 in this case does not equal 2. And what I mean is the 1 being a Mark Jewelers copy and a 1 being a George Perez signature. Those two things combined together does not equal the value, 2. It's like 1 + 1 maybe equals 3 or 4 or 5 because it's a very unique item. So just something to think about. I thought that this was a interesting post. Kind of wanted to talk about sales stuff every once in a while like this, and I thought this was could bring up some interesting comments in the comment section as well. So let me know, what do you think? What do you think about pricing? Are you required to sell the book for the last sold price? Obviously, my take is no, you are not. But let me know, and I will see you on the next one.